Previously on Lady Hart.
So I'll be making the boas out of soft organza fabric. Because I haven't done this specific design before, I am going to make one, because if I cut up 100 meters of fabric and I f it up, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lady Hart, some weirdo in a costume. Now last year you may remember I made a video on organza burlesque practice boas, and it was actually one of my most watched videos, so thank you to everyone that watched. Now I actually didn't make that video into a tutorial at all, and myself and a few of you had some troubleshooting issues with tubing as you moved it around. So we're going to fix all those issues today as I bring you Organza Boas version 2, new and improved. Now I still get the process super simple because I've watched just about every other tutorial on organza boas by now, and I've found that some of the steps can be super simplified, or they wanted you to use things that the average person just doesn't often have at their disposal. So I've cut all that out and made it super easy for everyone. Let's start at the very beginning, and I'll change into something a little more appropriate to work in. Hell yeah, Sabrina the Teenage Witch vibe. So let's start at the very beginning, and I've got some leftover red and leftover pink organza which I'll use to make these boas. Now I don't know the length of how much I've got left on these rolls, so the first thing I'm going to do is roll them out and measure them.
The width of my fabric organza rolls are 75 centimeters, which is a pretty common roll size in this fabric. I've ended up with 5.77 meters in the red.
So I'm going to cut that length in the pink as well. Now, I do have some more leftover pink than red, but don't you worry, I've got a plan.
The leftover pink I had on the roll ended up as 4 meters, which I'm going to divide amongst the other pink strips to alternate length and colors. But first I'll be cutting these rolls directly in half, so remember from this point forward, we'll end up with 2 of everything. I'm going to divide the 2 leftover pink 4 meter strips and add 2 meters to each of the longer pink strips to make them 7.77 meters. And then with the second pink 4 meter strip, I'm just going to sit that right in the middle of the boa on its own. Once I attach all the strips together, I will have one continuous strip that is 31.08 meters long and 37.50 centimeters wide. Now I'm not worried about the finished width of the boa, but we'll find out together at the end if we've got enough length to make the boa 1.5 meters when it's finished. If you're working with just one color of organza and a fresh roll of fabric, well, this is a breeze. All you need to do is measure the length of your fabric. So say you have 25 meters on your fresh roll. So you would cut your fabric width in half and you'd be attaching the strip directly onto the other one that you just cut in half to make it a 50 meter long strip. But because I'm working with leftover fabric and alternating lengths and colors, I had to do a bit of extra stupid calculations.
I am jumping way ahead, so let's rewind this all the way back. You can do the cut and tear method of the fabric all the way up it here if you want, but I'm a glutton for punishment and I enjoy giving myself carpal tunnel. So then we're going to take our strip and we're going to fold it in half and sew down the edge using just a straight stitch. There are a lot of meters to sew, so get comfortable because this is going to take a while. With the magic of editing, you don't have to wait for me though. So now we've ended up with all these strips, and the next thing we're going to do is connect them all together. Now I'm going to show you a nifty little trick here because many of the other tutorials were like, pull out your sleeve attachment for this part of the process. And I'm like, what the is a sleeve attachment? I don't have one of those just lying around, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. So I will show you a really, really easy way of connecting these together.
Here are the two ends of the strips that I want to connect together. So what I'm going to do is unpick the stitching on the edge. Now it doesn't matter if you mess this up a little bit because we're going to sew over the top anyway. So we're going to unpick this thread, which may take a bit, until that edge is flat. So we're going to do that on both sides. So now we have two flat edges of the strips. So that is the two flat edges. Then we're just going to fold over both sides of the edges of the hem and just lay one on top of the other. And then we're going to pin that down. And the reason that we do the fold is so that we don't have just a raw edge on our finished product. Now there will be enough tube to hide edges and things like that, but it doesn't feel very nice if you do have an edge exposed on the outside. All right, so those are now connected together. So I am just going to sew straight down. So we've got that sewn together now, and then all we have to do is fold that in half again and just sew up that side seam again. And there you go, super easy way to connect them together. So I'll continue on with the rest, attaching one end to the other until it is one long noodle. This is such a little thing, but I feel like I should mention it. Make sure all your seams are on the same side as well, so you don't end up with seams on either side. Just makes it look a whole lot nicer and neater. Now, ideally, the best and easiest way to have done this entire process would have been to connect the strips while they were still flat. So sew them together while they were all still flat, then fold them in half and sew up the side. But you're going to have to learn this part of the process at some point anyway, so might as well show you now. And go through and cut off any of the yucky edges and the loose threads at this point. So now we finally ended up with our 31.8 meter long noodle. So now we are going to turn the entire tube inside out. So just reach into the tube with your arm like so, and just keep feeding your hand through until you reach the other side, and then we're going to pull it all through on itself. Okay, so running out of very quickly, so what I'm going to do is grab a trusty old broom, and I'm going to feed it straight onto the broom, so it should be much easier to turn out inside out. Okay, so now we've got that all up on there. So what I'm going to do is Keep feeding it through until it's entirely inside out.
This part is the big troubleshooting part, so pay attention.
Now, whilst I'm doing this, let me show you how it differs from my last video. So in my first video, I turned this all inside out like so, and as you can see, it sort of bunches up on itself, and it creates its own sort of tube in the middle there that you can see. And then what I did was I sewed just little points all the way down. But as you can see on that, see how it's all moving around quite a lot? So that was happening as you were moving around with it. So we're gonna fix that issue completely once we get this all turned inside out.
The solution to this is so simple. We haven't used enough fabric. That's it.
Okay, now we finally got the entire thing inside out. So as you can see, the seams are on the inside.
Moving right along.
We're going to use a ribbon as the center of our boa. I've got 3 meters worth of ribbon. I'm going to take my broom and I'm going to tie one end of the ribbon to the bottom. Not too tight. Then I'm going to run the length of the ribbon up the stand. And I'm just going to loop it through this handy hole that's actually here, but you could either tape or clip this on just to keep it upright. So there we go. That's on our broom. Then we're just going to feed the whole noodle back onto the broom with the ribbon inside. Alrighty, so we have ended up with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to untie the bottom and just slide the entire thing with the ribbon off the broom. Make sure you're just holding on to the edges of the ribbon. So now it's all on the ribbon. We're gonna slide it down to its tightest point. And you see now, when you move this around, there isn't any pulling at all, or the tubing issue that we had before. What we're gonna do next is I'm just gonna make a knot in the ribbon, because then I'm gonna grab the end and I'm gonna bunch it all up just under that knot. Now I'm gonna pin that in place and do the same with the other side. Now you can either hand sew or use the machine for this part. I'm gonna hand sew because I haven't done that in this video yet. So I'm just sewing the edges of the boa to the ribbon underneath and through the knot I've made, making sure I'm grabbing all those edges and hems and just making them clean and neat and attached to the ribbon. Then I'm just going to cut off the excess ribbon. And finally, I'm going to add a little tassel onto the end. And again, I'm just going to hand sew it, and you can use the machine if you want. And we are done. Now for the final measurements. At full floof, the width of the boa came in at around 21 centimeters. And for the length, drum roll please, 31.08 meters of fabric became 1.25 meters in the end. So we're just a little short on the 1.5 meters I wanted, and I suspected this, but I think the sweet spot of your fabric is creating a 40 to 45 meter long noodle. And in the end, that will get you your 1.5 meter boa or slightly longer. And if you wanted to make them long, what I would do is before I knot it off and sew the tassels, I would just repeat the entire process and then attach it on, and then you can continue on making it longer. So now that that's all done, there's only one thing left to do, and I'm sure you've been waiting the entire episode for it. So once more, with feeling, let's have a test go. Da 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 etc. And as you can see, no pulling. How cool is that? Thank you so much for joining me as I made version 2 of these boas. So they look a little bit different from the first version, but arguably more luxurious. And they don't have any troubleshooting issues this time. If you're into costumes, crafts, and chaos, please subscribe to my channel. It does help me out a lot. Thank you for joining me once again. I have been Lady Hart, and you have been an audience. I'll see you next week.
You're all doomed. Doomed. Doomed.